Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging headfirst into a story that doesn't just grip you, it truly seizes your imagination, even as it challenges pretty much every expectation you might hold for narrative, romance, and, well, justice. We're talking about Painter of the Night, a boys' love manhwa that has ignited, really intense conversations, captivated millions globally, and frankly, really dug its hooks into us, demanding a closer look.
It absolutely has.
This isn't just some fleeting trend. It's a completed historical series by the artist Duck, published on Legend Comics, and it's really renowned for its intense, often beautiful, and undeniably controversial plot.
Right.
So picture this. Historical Korea, a world of intricate artistry and a rigid social hierarchy, and a relationship that absolutely defies any easy categorization, pushing boundaries both aesthetically and ethically.
And our mission today is to meticulously peel back the many layers of this fascinating yet deeply polarizing narrative. We aim to explore its complex, often disturbing characters, its stunningly intricate artwork, and the challenging, provocative themes it confronts head-on.
Yeah, unpack it all.
Exactly. Our goal is to help you understand precisely why Painter of the Night resonates so powerfully with some readers, drawing them into its dark romance, and simultaneously why it deeply disturbs so many others, sparking outrage and ethical debate. We're not just summarizing, we will delve into the profound nuances of its story, the psychological intricacies of its character development, and the heated, ongoing debates surrounding its audacious depiction of love, trauma, power, and consent. It's a lot to unpack, but it's a deep dive that offers significant insights into contemporary media and audience reception.
Okay, but before we truly immerse ourselves, a very important note for you, our listener. This deep dive, and by extension the manhwa Painter of the Night itself, contains frank discussions of incredibly sensitive and potentially upsetting topics.
Yes, absolutely crucial point.
We will be talking about violence, sexual assault, coercion, various forms of abuse, and profound psychological trauma. The story also unflinchingly explores severe power imbalances, manipulative behaviors, and the lasting psychological scars that such experiences leave.
These themes are really central to the work.
They are. And we understand these are heavy subjects, and your well-being is paramount. Please prioritize your mental health while listening. We truly encourage you to step away or take a break at any point if these topics feel too overwhelming or triggering for you today. We respect your boundaries.
Please do.
Okay, let's begin with the initial brushstrokes then. Let's understand what Painter of the Night truly is, for those who might be encountering it for the first time, or perhaps for those who know of it only vaguely. Can you give us the essential overview, sort of set the stage for this complex story?
Absolutely. So at its core, Painter of the Night, often known by its Korean title Yawakoap or War, is a completed historical boys' love, or BL manhwa.
Right,
Yeah, and for those maybe not familiar, BL, originating from Japan as boys' love, is a genre of fictional media focusing on romantic and sexual relationships between male characters, primarily created, historically anyway, for a female audience. And manhwa simply refers to South Korean comics, like Japanese manga or American comics.
Got it.
This particular series was created by the artist Duck and published on Legend Comics, which is a pretty popular webtoon platform. And it's quite extensive, spanning 3 complete seasons and a total of 102 chapters, plus additional side stories that expand its universe.
Wow, 102 chapters. That's a commitment.
It is. But you're right, it's far more than just a historical romance. At its heart, Painter of the Night is an intense psychological drama meticulously crafted around an abusive and obsessive relationship, which immediately sets it apart and makes it so impactful, for better or worse, within the BL genre.
That immediately sounds like a premise designed to provoke. Can you walk us through the initial setup, the very first moments that define this controversial core, and maybe introduce us to the 2 central figures caught in this unfolding drama?
Indeed, the story wastes absolutely no time in establishing its contentious foundations. We're first introduced to Na-kyum, a protagonist who embodies both immense talent and profound vulnerability.
Okay.
He's a gifted yet timid painter, renowned for creating homoerotic art, known as shunga in the East Asian tradition art that often depicted explicit sexual acts. However, due to societal shame, compounded by personal heartbreak, he's retired from painting and has succumbed to heavy drinking, living a pretty reclusive life.
So he's already in a bad place.
Very much so. And then the story introduces its catalyst, Seungho. Seungho is a wealthy, sadistic nobleman, a yangban, which in historical Korea denoted a member of the elite ruling class with immense social power, privilege, and often, like, unchecked authority.
Ah, the power imbalances right there.
Immediately, he becomes utterly obsessed with Na-kyum's art, and driven by this fixation, he tracks Na-kyum down, forcibly abducts him, and compels him to become his personal painter under duress.
Abducts him, wow.
Yes. This act of kidnapping and forced servitude immediately establishes a stark, undeniable, and deeply problematic power imbalance that defines their entire relationship from its very inception.
So Na-kyum is dragged into this completely against his will. That initial struggle must be truly heartbreaking, designed to immediately pull the reader into his terrifying predicament. How does the narrative initially portray Na-kyum's response to this horrific capture and the abuse he endures?
It's depicted with a brutal, almost visceral honesty. Na-kyum's initial reaction is one of complete resistance, horror, and profound despair. He's utterly terrified, trapped in a situation where he has no agency, no escape.
You could just imagine the fear.
Absolutely. You witness his helplessness as he's subjected to repeated physical and sexual abuse at Seungho's hands. The narrative doesn't shy away from these scenes. They're designed to shock the reader, to make you feel Na-kyum's desperate plight, his loss of self, and the sheer terror of being completely at the mercy of his captor. It's a harrowing, brutal start, laying bare the foundations of a deeply non-consensual dynamic that challenges the reader from the very first chapter.
And that brutality, as you mentioned, is precisely what fueled the immediate controversy. How did this initial premise land with readers? What was the immediate impact, and why did it become such a lightning rod for debate?
Precisely because it refused to sugarcoat the abuse. The reception was deeply, immediately polarized. On one side, some readers were drawn to the sheer intensity of the emotional drama, the raw psychological depths, and the magnetic, albeit dark, character dynamics. They found it compelling as a dark romance, maybe, or a study in human extremes.
Okay, I can see that appeal, the intensity.
Right. But on the other hand, a very significant portion of the readership was absolutely horrified and profoundly disturbed by what they perceived as the blatant romanticization of non-consensual acts, sexual violence, and abuse.
That's the core issue, isn't it? Romanticization.
Exactly. This wasn't just a story. It was a cultural phenomenon that launched literally 1,000 discourse threads across online communities. Forums, social media, fan sites. They just exploded with passionate debates. Readers were grappling with fundamental questions. Can a story that begins with such severe non-consent ever be redeemed? Does providing a character's backstory for their cruelty excuse their actions? And at what point does dark romance cross into the problematic territory of normalizing abuse? This initial impact wasn't just about plot points. It was about confronting deeply held ethical and moral boundaries within fiction.
Okay, with that intense groundwork laid, how does this harrowing relationship unfold? Let's trace the escalating drama and shifting dynamics through its 3 pivotal seasons, starting with the very crucible of their initial encounter.
Indeed, the narrative progresses through distinct, emotionally charged phases. Season 1, spanning chapters 1 to 44, is aptly titled Obsession Ignites, and it really lays the foundation of their toxic bond, focusing heavily on capture and control.
Capture and control, okay.
This is where Lord Yoon Seungho's insatiable obsession culminates in the outright kidnapping of Na-kyum, forcing him to serve as his exclusive personal painter. The power dynamic is stark. Na-kyum is relentlessly victimized by the sadistic and powerful Seungho. Any attempts at resistance are, frankly, futile, serving only to intensify his captor's resolve.
That's bleak.
It is. Chapter by chapter, Na-kyum's trauma builds from repeated sexual assault, profound humiliation, and an almost constant state of terror.
And do other characters come into play here?
Yes, during this period, we're also introduced to another crucial character, Jung In-hun. He was Na-kyum's former teacher, a scholar, and the object of Na-kyum's unrequited, idealized love.
Oh, a past love interest. That complicates things.
It really does. And what's chilling is how Seungho discovers this past connection and immediately weaponizes it, using In-hun as a tool to further torment Na-kyum, fueled by his own escalating jealousy and the desire to possess Na-kyum's affections completely, not just his body or his art.
So cruel.
It's pure manipulation. You begin to see subtle, unsettling shifts even in this early stage. Seungho's possessiveness extends beyond Na-kyum's artistic talent to Na-kyum himself. Simultaneously, Na-kyum's deep fear and self-loathing begin to intertwine with a terrifying, nascent sense of dependence on his abuser.
Dependence, even amidst the abuse.
Yes, it's here, amidst the brutality and despair, that the first hints of Stockholm Syndrome begin to manifest, where Na-kyum starts seeking out glimmers of safety within his captivity. Season 1 culminates in a very fragile, tense ceasefire, a period of uneasy calm, but Na-kyum remains very much ensnared in Seungho's dangerous world, his safety never truly guaranteed.
That sounds like an utterly suffocating environment to leave us with at the end of the first season. What then happens to this twisted dynamic as we move into Season 2, and how do the stakes and the psychological complexities deepen?
Right. Season 2, covering chapters 45 to 76, aptly named Consequences and Trauma, truly deepens the narrative by introducing significant complications and layers of manipulation. This is where we see Na-kyum experience a gradual awakening regarding his past idealized love for Young In-hun.
Ah, so he starts seeing In-hun differently.
Exactly. He begins to recognize In-hun's manipulative and deeply self-serving nature, realizing he was basically being used as a means to In-hun's social advancement rather than being genuinely cared for. This disillusionment leads to a pivotal shift in Na-kyum's emotional focus, subtly and disturbingly redirecting it towards Seungho.
Coercion. Really? How does that work?
It's not necessarily love in a conventional sense, not yet anyway, but a twisted dependency, a survival mechanism where his immediate reality dictates that Seungho, despite being his abuser, is also his most powerful, immediate protector.
Wow, that's complex.
Extremely. And crucially, this season also delves into Seungho's own traumatic childhood. The narrative reveals that he suffered severe abuse, likely sexual and emotional, inflicted upon him by his father in a cruel attempt to cure his homosexuality.
Okay, so we get Seungho's backstory.
Yes, and this provides a profound psychological context for his sadism, helping readers understand the roots of his cruelty and his inability to form healthy attachments. However, and this is absolutely vital, the narrative presents this as context, exploring the origins of his pathology, not as a justification for his heinous actions against Na-kyum.
That's a really important distinction, context versus justification.
Absolutely crucial. External conflicts also become more pronounced. Noblemen like Lee Ji-wa, who is both Seungho's childhood friend and an early romantic rival for Na-kyum's attention, along with his allies, escalate into political antagonists, stirring up trouble for Seungho.
So more drama from the outside.
Exactly. And interestingly, Ji-wa, who initially schemed against Na-kyum by hiring an assassin, begins to show genuine remorse for his actions, highlighting a surprising capacity for change.
Oh, that's interesting. A bit of redemption, maybe.
Potentially. We also meet Min, an aristocratic voyeur who actively delights in instigating violence and chaos purely for his own entertainment. Min acts as a cynical catalyst, forcing Seungho to confront his own nature and make difficult choices in protecting what he now perceives as his.
Just stirring the pot.
Totally. And then there's Mumiyong, or No Name, the assassin initially hired by Ji-wa. In a significant moral twist, Mumiyong surprisingly refuses to kill Na-kyum, evolving into a morally ambiguous yet ultimately protective figure for her.
A reluctant protector.
Okay. By the end of Season 2, the toxic romance between Na-kyum and Seungho deepens alarmingly. As Na-kyum's dependency grows more pronounced and Seungho's possessiveness intensifies, their relationship solidifies into a deeply unhealthy, mutually obsessive dynamic. It's in these later chapters that many readers feel Na-kyum begins to choose Seungho, or at least accept him as an inextricable part of his life, beyond just mere survival, a chilling development that sparked intense ethical debates among the fan base.
Choose him. Wow. So after 2 seasons of escalating trauma and twisted dependency, how does this incredibly complex narrative attempt to find its resolution in the final arc? What kind of penance, if any, do these characters face?
The final arc, Season 3, spanning chapters 77 to 102, titled Power, Politics, Penance, brings the story to its climactic resolution and, predictably, its most controversial aftermath.
Right, the ending everyone talks about.
Exactly. This is where the relentless abuse, intricate political machinations, and deep-seated trauma finally culminate in a chaotic and violent conclusion. A pivotal moment sees Na-kyum brutally attacked by other noblemen, an event that tragically solidifies his complete psychological and emotional dependence on Seungho as his sole, albeit abusive, protector.
Oh, no, another attack.
Yes, and it pushes him further towards Seungho. During this period of intense upheaval, Young In-hun, who had served as a key antagonist and manipulated Na-kyum, is killed by Lord Song Sasian, effectively removing him from the narrative and freeing Na-kyum from his influence.
So one threat removed.
Correct. Seungho himself faces a critical, violent confrontation. He kills his own abusive father. This act, while horrific, is presented in the narrative as providing Seungho with a twisted form of closure regarding his own profound childhood trauma, which the story frames as paving the way for a potential, though, as we'll discuss, heavily debated change in his character.
Killing his father. That's huge. And does he face consequences?
He does. As a consequence of his own cruelty and the political fallout from his actions, Seungho is demoted, losing much of his absolute power and status.
Okay, so some accountability there. And Na-kyum.
What's truly remarkable in this final season is Na-kyum's emerging agency. Despite all the suffering he's endured, he begins to grow what the narrative describes as a spine of steel.
Really? That's good to hear.
Yes, he starts setting clear boundaries, publicly defending Seungho, which is a complex act of loyalty and protection, and most importantly, reclaiming his art for himself, no longer painting solely under duress.
He finds his voice again through his art.
In a way, yes. The story then concludes after a time jump, presenting what is explicitly framed within the narrative as a happy ending. Na-kyum and Seungho are reunited and depicted as a happy, loving couple, seemingly having found peace together.
The happy ending.
Okay. This naturally remains a central point of contention for many readers, who view it as a deeply problematic romanticization of a highly toxic and abusive relationship, one that, they argue, largely ignores the lasting scars of Na-kyum's trauma. The endgame vibe of their relationship, from the author's perspective, shifts from pure possession to a form of mutual protection and partnership, with Na-kyum even becoming a co-creator in their complex shared bond.
We've traced the brutal landscape of their story, but to truly understand Painter of the Night, we need to journey inwards. What complex psychological forces are at play in these characters that make them so utterly captivating and often so deeply disturbing? Let's dive into the minds behind these figures. Na-kyum, the resilient candle, and Seungho, the destructive storm.
Indeed, their psychologies are meticulously detailed, forming the core of the story's enduring impact. Let's start with Baek Na-kyum, our candle, and truly the story's ethical compass.
Okay.
He's depicted as being in his early 20s, an exceptionally talented painter of shunga. His origin story is crucial. He was raised in a gisang house, a traditional Korean establishment run by female entertainers who were often highly cultured and artistic, yet held a low social status, making them vulnerable and marginalized by Hina, who is more like a sister or guardian to him.
Right, that context is important.
Very. This upbringing, while exposing him to the erotic, also firmly cemented his low-born status in a rigid social hierarchy. Before his abduction, he gained recognition, publishing his work under the pseudonym Jung Namin, adopting the surname of Jung In-hun. His unrequited love for In-hun and the shame associated with his art led him to quit painting and descend into heavy drinking.
So he carried a lot of shame.
A huge amount. Psychologically, Na-kyum is introverted and timid by nature, yet beneath that exterior, he possesses a surprising stubborn streak and an undeniable fierce will to survive. He has been, in many ways, trauma-trained to defer to authority figures, a survival mechanism developed early in life.
That makes sense, given his background.
Exactly. His core struggle is deeply rooted in internalized shame over his art, his desire, and his own sexuality, feelings exacerbated by societal condemnation and his low social standing. His emotional turmoil is profound, marked by periods of deep depression, paralyzing fear, and intense self-loathing. His character arc is, tragically, a classic journey into Stockholm Syndrome.
There it is again, Stockholm Syndrome.
His initial terror eventually gives way to a complex emotional dependency, where he starts finding comfort and even a twisted form of affection in his abusive relationship. He begins to view Seungho as his sole protector and a source of stability, however violent, in his otherwise helpless situation. Clinically, his attachment style leans towards anxious avoidant, a pattern often seen in individuals who deeply desire intimacy but are simultaneously terrified of it, leading them to push people away while secretly craving closeness, a classic response to early life instability and inconsistent care.
It's a truly harrowing transformation. From that initial overwhelming resistance, Na-kyum evolves, or perhaps adapts, in ways that are deeply unsettling to witness. What are the key moments or shifts that illustrate this journey from intense hatred to that complex, problematic dependency, and eventually to an emerging sense of agency?
His evolution is a tragic yet compelling study in survival. Initially, Na-kyum's hatred for Seungho is palpable and absolute. His actions are driven by pure self-preservation, attempting escape or defiance, however futile. But as the abuse continues, and as his options dwindle, a shift occurs.
A mental shift.
Yes, the narrative portrays his body and mind adjusting to the inescapable reality. He begins to internalize Seungho's presence as a constant, dangerous, yet paradoxically a dependable factor in his life. The complex emotional dependency, which we've identified as Stockholm Syndrome, isn't a sudden love, but a survival tactic where his nervous system learns to seek safety and even comfort from his captor.
Finding comfort in the abuser.
It's deeply unsettling. We see moments where Seungho offers a flicker of tenderness, however fleeting, and Na-kyum clings to it, needing it for psychological respite. This is where the loss of self truly clashes with the will to survive. Yet even through this profound trauma, the character retains a remarkable, almost defiant resilience.
He doesn't completely break.
No. While his initial affection for Seungho is born of coercion, the later narrative attempts to show him developing genuine feelings. His emerging strength is visible when he starts to reclaim his art, not for Seungho's pleasure, but for himself. He begins to assert boundaries, small at first, then more pronounced. His growth arc, problematic as its romantic framing may be, is presented as him developing agency, learning to articulate his needs, and ultimately, by the end, choosing Seungho not solely out of fear, but ostensibly out of a complex, ingrained desire that the narrative validates.
But if Na-kyum is the resilient candle flickering in the storm, then Seungho is, unequivocally, that storm itself. Chaotic, destructive, yet harboring a hidden core of profound pain. What makes him such a compelling and often terrifying anti-hero?
Yeah.
And how does his own history contribute to the man he becomes?
Seungho is undeniably a force of nature, driven by a deeply damaged psyche. He's in his mid to late 20s, a powerful, feared Yangban, and the head of his household, a position he gained after his father's rejection. He's notorious for his volatile moods, immense power, and consuming obsession with Na-kyum.
The storm, indeed.
Exactly. His psychological profile is a direct consequence of severe childhood trauma. He suffered profound abuse, both likely sexual and emotional, sanctioned by his father in a cruel, misguided attempt to cure his homosexuality.
We touched on that. The father's cure. Horrific.
Utterly. This horrific upbringing left him with classic PTSD-like symptoms, manifesting as extreme hypervigilance, a constant, exhausting state of alertness, always scanning for potential threats, which directly fuels his paranoia and possessiveness. He also experiences episodes of dissociation, mentally checking out during moments of distress or intense rage, and harbors a profound, all-consuming distrust of others, which makes genuine connection almost impossible.
So he's constantly on edge, always expecting betrayal.
Always. This trauma is the root of his sadism and instability. He's prone to violent mood swings, deep-seated anger, and sadistic tendencies that are clearly a reenactment of the control and pain inflicted upon him. He's narcissistic and intensely possessive, viewing Na-kyum initially as an object, a piece of property to own and control, rather than a person with feelings or autonomy.
Just an object for his obsession.
Precisely. His jealousy becomes a destructive force, threatening anyone who shows interest in Na-kyum. His attachment style is disorganized, what clinical psychologists often refer to as a trauma bond. This is a deeply confusing and often self-destructive pattern where an individual, having experienced abuse or neglect, subconsciously confuses intense connection with domination, often reenacting or gravitating towards the very dynamics that cause them pain.
So he repeats the patterns of his own abuse.
Tragically, yes. His defense mechanisms are brutal. Projection, where he forces Na-kyum into submission to feel control, acting out through sexual aggression instead of verbalizing his own hurt or vulnerability, and those moments of dissociation after his rages, almost as if he removes himself from the atrocities he commits.
You paint a picture of Seungho's journey from raw sadism to a contested atonement. What are the specific turning points, or perhaps what are the missing elements that leave so many readers debating whether his growth is truly sufficient or if he ever genuinely changes?
His evolution is indeed one of the most contentious points of the entire series. Seungho begins as a purely cruel, cold-blooded figure, completely dominated by his trauma, his instability, and his unchecked power. However, his obsessive encounter with Na-kyum, particularly Na-kyum's unexpected resilience and artistic spirit, begins to challenge Seungho's rigid control.
Na-kyum gets under his skin.
Absolutely. We see glimmers of vulnerability, often expressed as an almost infantile jealousy towards anyone who might draw Na-kyum's attention. While the narrative portrays him showing subtle signs of attachment and a desire for Na-kyum's genuine affection, these are often still rooted in possessiveness rather than true respect or empathy.
So it's still about ownership.
Often, yes. He does become less physically abusive over time, particularly towards Na-kyum, but the underlying power dynamic and his manipulative tendencies often persist, albeit in subtler forms.
Okay, subtler, but still there.
Right. The narrative attempts to show his growth through consequences, his demotion, and, significantly, his ultimate confrontation with and killing of his abusive father. These acts are presented as providing him a form of closure, a breaking of the cycle of abuse he suffered. The story frames this as him finding a path towards happiness and learning that care doesn't equate to control.
But does he really learn that? That's the question, isn't it?
That is the core question. Many readers argue that his atonement is deeply insufficient. They point to the narrative's perceived failure to adequately address the trauma he inflicted, or to show him truly grappling with the gravity of his actions rather than just his own suffering. Specific changes readers debate include whether his care is still inherently possessive if he truly understands consent, or if his outward expressions of love are simply a more refined form of control.
Yeah, did he truly change or just adapt his methods?
Exactly. For many, his core narcissistic and sadistic personality remains deeply flawed, and the consequences he faces don't truly match the scale of his initial cruelty, leading to the profound debate around whether his character arc truly represents redemption or merely a convenient narrative shift.
Beyond these two central figures, who are undoubtedly the sun and moon of this story, other characters cast their own significant shadows or occasionally bring light. Can you introduce us to some of the key, influential, supporting characters and how they shape the conflict?
Certainly. These characters aren't just background elements, they are vital in driving the plot and revealing deeper facets of our protagonists.
Okay, who should we know about?
First, Young In-hun, whom we might call the pretty poison. He was Na-kyum's former mentor, a respected scholar, and for a long time the object of Na-kyum's unrequited, idealized love, what proves to be a false love.
Right, the first love interest.
Exactly. In-hun acts as a primary source of romantic and emotional conflict. Seungho, observing Na-kyum's lingering infatuation, ruthlessly uses this connection to torment Na-kyum, turning it into a tool of psychological torture. However, In-hun's true selfish nature is gradually exposed throughout the series. He's more concerned with his own social advancement than Na-kyum's well-being.
So he was using Na-kyum.
Pretty much. This exposure ultimately frees Na-kyum's affections from him. His ultimate fate, murdered by Lord Song-haseon, conveniently removes him as a direct threat to the central, albeit toxic, relationship. Psychologically, In-hun is depicted as narcissistic and self-serving.
Okay, so not a good guy. Who else?
Then we have Lee Ji-woo, whom we can describe as the fallen friend. He's a nobleman, initially a childhood friend of Seungho, and also an early romantic rival for Na-kyum's attention.
Ah, the rival friend.
Yeah.
Classic trope.
It is, but with a twist. His jealousy and rivalry with Na-kyum creates significant external conflict, leading him to make impulsive, harmful decisions. Crucially, his decision to hire an assassin to remove Na-kyum leads him down a path of profound guilt and regret.
He hires an assassin.
He does. But what's notable about Ji-woo is his genuine character growth. Unlike many characters in this brutal world, he undergoes a real change, developing remorse for his actions and eventually letting go of his infatuation, choosing not to harm Na-kyum further. He embodies the archetype of the tragic second lead, a character who could have been an antagonist but finds a path to redemption.
Interesting, so some complexity there.
Definitely. Then there's Yoon Chang-hyun, Seungho's father. He is the ultimate antagonist, representing the deeply entrenched abuses of power.
The root of Seungho's trauma.
Exactly. He's portrayed as a cruel and utterly abusive figure, directly responsible for the deep trauma that so profoundly shapes Seungho's sadistic and unstable nature. His actions, which reportedly included severe abuse to cure his son's perceived homosexuality, are the primary cause of Seungho's pathology. Seungho, in turn, projects much of this inherited trauma and cruelty onto Na-kyum.
The cycle of abuse.
His final confrontation and death at Seungho's hands are a pivotal moment, providing Seungho with a twisted, violent form of closure, allowing him to break free from his father's direct influence.
Okay, who else is key?
Min serves as an agent of chaos, or the snake. He's another aristocratic manipulator who instigates cruelty purely for his own depraved entertainment, often exacerbating situations for others' suffering.
Just enjoys watching the world burn.
Pretty much. His influence often pushes Seungho to confront his own nature and make difficult choices in protecting Na-kyum. Min represents the unrepentant, exploitative side of the nobility, reveling in the suffering of those beneath him.
A real piece of work.
Absolutely. And finally, Mumyang, or No Name, the character we call the Blade. He's the enigmatic assassin initially hired by Jiwa to kill Na-kyum.
The one Jiwa hired.
Yes.
Yes.
Surprisingly, Moon-young refuses to carry out the order, choosing instead to protect Na-kyum in various subtle ways. He evolves into a shadow protector, a morally gray figure who demonstrates a reluctant, almost unexpected morality amidst the story's pervasive darkness. His actions hint that not everyone in this harsh world is completely devoid of empathy, even if their methods are questionable.
A flicker of conscience.
A small one, yeah. And we should also mention Hina, Na-kyum's older sister and guardian, who ran the Jiseng house where he grew up. Her fierce, almost maternal protection of Na-kyum, while deeply well-intended and born of love, sometimes borders on infantilization, reflecting her desperate desire to shield him from the cruelties of their world.
She tries to protect him.
She does. She is a voice of reason, often the first to identify the dangers of Na-kyum's entanglement with Seungho, and notably, the one who explicitly brings up the idea of Stockholm Syndrome, forcing Na-kyum to reflect on his emerging feelings.
So what does this all mean for us, the readers, when we engage with Painter of the Night? These are the profound themes that make this deep dive so compelling and frankly so controversial, igniting so much discussion and debate. Let's really get into the core of these challenging ideas.
Oh, okay. One of the most significant and certainly the most controversial thematic discussions revolving around Painter of the Night is the sexualization and abuse within the boys' love genre.
Right, the elephant in the room for a lot of BL.
It really is. The pervasive use of abuse and non-consensual acts as a central plot device in this manhwa has drawn immense criticism, sparking a global conversation within the BL community and beyond. Many critics argue quite vehemently that Painter of the Night, like similar works, tends to fetishize abuse and sexual violence, ultimately presenting deeply toxic relationships as romantic or even aspirational. This, they argue, can desensitize audiences to real-world trauma and normalize problematic power dynamics.
That's a serious charge, the fetishization.
It is. The core debate here isn't just about depicting abuse, but whether the story excuses or romanticizes it. Some interpretations contend, no, it explains, then demands amends. Season 2-3 are about accountability. Proponents of this view might highlight Seungho's eventual remorse, his pursuit of Na-kyum's affection, and the consequences he faces as evidence that the story condemns his initial actions and focuses on a path towards, however flawed, healing. They might argue that seeing the roots of Seungho's cruelty provides context, not absolution.
Okay, so one view is it's about accountability, eventually.
Right. However, conflicting views, also prominent in reader discourse, strongly assert the author glances over Seungho's mistreatment once it was decided that Na-kyum was in love with his abuser. This notion of Stockholm Syndrome is also brushed off.
Ah, so the opposite view just ignores the abuse later on.
Exactly. This direct contradiction doesn't just highlight an ethical minefield, it forces us to confront a fundamental question. Can a narrative truly separate context for a character's abusive behavior from justification, especially when that character eventually receives a form of narrative redemption and a happy ending with his victim?
Yeah, that's tough.
The varied reader responses show how profoundly our individual ethical frameworks, our beliefs about trauma, consent, and accountability, shape our interpretation of fiction, making this far more than just a plot point, but a profound ethical dilemma for audiences.
Okay, what other major themes are at play?
Another stark and unflinching theme explored in the manhwa is power and wealth imbalances. The story realistically portrays the rigid historical Korean class divides where birthright dictated destiny.
We saw that immediately with Seungho and Na-kyum.
Absolutely. Seungho's aristocratic status as a Yangbon and his immense inherited power allow him to exploit Na-kyum, who, as a commoner raised in a Giseng house, has virtually no options or legal recourse within society. His social standing makes him inherently vulnerable, a target for anyone with authority.
He's trapped by his status.
Completely. The narrative powerfully emphasizes how wealthy and influential individuals in this setting manipulate situations, commit heinous acts, and evade consequences with shocking impunity. For instance, Seungho's initial abduction of Na-kyum, his public displays of ownership, and the sexual assaults he commits are largely ignored or tacitly accepted by a society that prioritizes class and reputation over individual rights. Na-kyum's consistent victimization is directly, tragically linked to his low social status.
It's a critique of that social structure, then.
Very much so. Artistic expression and the gaze are also absolutely central, providing both beauty and profound conflict. Na-kyum's talent for painting shunga is paradoxically both the source of his exceptional gift and passion, and the very thing that leads directly to his capture and exploitation by Seungho.
His art is both a blessing and a curse.
Precisely. The story masterfully explores how art can be a profound, intensely personal form of self-expression, a way to channel inner desires and observations, yet it can also be corrupted and used as a potent tool for control, degradation, and even torture.
Painting under duress versus painting freely.
Yes, the ethical distinction between Na-kyum painting by his own choice, which the narrative frames as a healthy reclamation of self, versus being brutally forced to paint for Seungho's pleasure, which is presented as a profound corruption of his soul, becomes a battleground for his agency and consent throughout the entire series. His paintings often serve as a mirror, reflecting both his torment and his slowly re-emerging will.
That's fascinating. And trauma, you mentioned trauma inheritance.
Yes, trauma and its profound intergenerational effects, sometimes referred to as trauma inheritance, is another deep, inescapable vein running through Painter of the Night. Both main characters are depicted as deeply traumatized individuals, their actions, reactions, and entire psychologies undeniably shaped by past experiences.
We see it clearly in both of them.
We do. Na-kyum suffers from chronic depressive episodes, a significant lack of appetite, often a physical manifestation of his emotional distress, and the lasting psychological effects of his prolonged abuse, all culminating in that classic manifestation of Stockholm Syndrome. His body and mind are in a constant state of hyper-alertness and fear.
The physical toll is shown, too.
Yes. And Seungho's violent sadism, as we've discussed, is explicitly linked to his own traumatic upbringing, specifically the severe abuse he endured at the hands of his father. His later overprotective nature, particularly towards Na-kyum, is heavily emphasized by a palpable paranoia and anxiety of losing him, echoing his own experiences of abandonment and control.
His trauma drives his possessiveness.
Exactly. Here again, we face a major controversy. Is Seungho's trauma used for justification or merely for context? Some readers argue the story uses his trauma to dangerously justify his abhorrent behavior, implying a damaged goods narrative that excuses his actions. However, others contend it simply provides context, explaining the roots of his cruelty without excusing his actions, aiming to foster understanding of his pathology rather than sympathy for his abuse.
That justification versus context debate again.
It comes up again and again. One source directly states, surprisingly, the story implies that a person's past traumas can or should justify their behavior, directly feeding into the ongoing heated debate about the story's moral stance. The narrative attempts to show a breaking of the cycle of abuse through Seungho's eventual actions, but it unequivocally acknowledges the deep, lingering scars that continue to define both characters.
Which brings us back to Stockholm Syndrome. You said it's a core point.
It really is arguably the core discussion point of the entire series and a major source of its divisiveness. Na-kyum's emotional journey from intense fear and repulsion at the beginning of his captivity to a disturbing development of affection for his captor, Seungho is widely recognized as a classic literary portrayal of Stockholm Syndrome.
It fits the definition pretty clearly.
It does. This psychological phenomenon describes captives developing a bond with their captors, often seeing them as protectors and rescuers rather than tormentors as a survival mechanism. However, the story faces significant criticism for its perceived uncritical framing of this transition, particularly given the eventual happy ending.
So the criticism is how the story frames it.
Precisely. The narrative explicitly introduces this conflict. Na-kyum's sister, Hina, even raises the idea of Stockholm Syndrome directly, forcing Na-kyum to reflect on his emerging affection for Seungho as a mere survival tactic rather than genuine love. Yet, for many readers, the story seems to brush off this crucial notion by ultimately validating the relationship as one of true love and mutual choice, despite its coercive origins.
Dismissing the psychological reality for a romantic ending.
That's the criticism, yes. This perceived dismissal of a serious psychological effect in favor of a romanticized conclusion is deeply problematic for a large segment of the audience.
Okay, one last theme you mentioned. Class and hypocrisy.
Yes, finally, the manhwa is merciless in its depiction of class and hypocrisy. It unflinchingly exposes the double standards of Yangbon men who held immense societal power and respect. These men are shown committing heinous, often sexually deviant and violent acts in private, abusing their power and exploiting those beneath them, all while maintaining an impeccable facade of morality and respectability in public life.
The public face versus the private monster.
Exactly. This societal critique underpins much of the suffering and power dynamics we see unfold. For instance, Seungho's father, a powerful Yangbon, brutally abuses his son behind closed doors to maintain his family's honor, and other noblemen like Min freely indulge in voyeurism and violence, knowing their social standing protects them from repercussions. It's a harsh, critical lens on the corruption of power.
Despite all the weighty controversy and the challenging themes we've just dissected, there's one aspect of Painter of the Night that almost universally receives resounding praise, cutting across all reader opinions. It's breathtaking art.
Oh, absolutely.
As one reader eloquently put it, the art of the series is aesthetically pleasing. It is very detailed, though I'm not talking about the explicit scenes of the story. And honestly, I wholeheartedly agree. The visual storytelling here is simply in a league of its own.
And that praise is not only well-deserved, but foundational to the manhwa's widespread appeal. Bayon-duk's masterful style is consistently lauded for being incredibly detailed, expressive, and atmospheric. The artwork doesn't just look good, it's an integral part of the narrative, instrumental in capturing the historical Joseon setting with remarkable accuracy and beauty.
It really transports you there.
It does. And conveying the raw, often agonizing emotions of the characters, and intensifying the impact of every scene, whether it's tender, violent, or erotically charged. This consistently high-quality artwork is frequently cited as a key reason for the manhwa's immense popularity, attracting and retaining readers even among those who are deeply critical of the plot's thematic choices and ethical implications.
The art keeps people reading, even if the story makes them uncomfortable.
That's often the case, yes. The art pulls you in, compelling you to witness the unfolding story regardless of your comfort with its content.
Can we break down what makes the art so special? You mentioned craft notes.
Yes, let's delve into some of the specific craft notes that make Bayon-duk's art so potent. The use of palettes is particularly sophisticated. You'll notice the deliberate employment of candlelight and night palettes. These aren't just aesthetic choices, they are narrative devices, masterfully conveying intimacy, secrets, and lurking danger simultaneously.
Light and shadow telling a story.
Exactly. The warm glow of a lamp might highlight a moment of fragile connection, while the deep, inky shadows of night emphasize a scene of terror or illicit desire. For instance, early scenes of Na-kyum painting in Seungho's manor are often bathed in the soft, isolating glow of a single candle, symbolizing his precarious existence and the intense, private world Seungho forces him into.
That makes sense. What about silhouettes?
Silhouettes are also skillfully employed for what we call erotic heavy lifting. The artist manages to suggest explicit detail, conveying the heat and intensity of sexual encounters without always needing to show everything outright.
Suggestion being more powerful than explicitness.
Sometimes, yes. This technique often amplifies the sense of forbidden desire and privacy, allowing the reader's imagination to fill in the gaps, making the scenes more impactful while sometimes softening the direct portrayal of non-consensual acts, which itself is a complex choice. Take, for example, the moments where Seungho and Na-kyum are depicted only by their intertwined forms against a moonlit window. The suggestion of intimacy and power is immediate, without needing to be graphically explicit.
Right, I remember those panels. And the panel rhythm.
The panel rhythm is another masterful technique. Bayon-duk utilizes tight, breathless grids during moments of violence, high tension, or intense emotional distress, creating a sense of claustrophobia and urgency that mirrors the character's internal states.
Makes you feel trapped along with the character.
Precisely. Conversely, wide, airy frames are used for moments of tenderness, reflection, or fleeting calm, providing visual breathing room and emphasizing the rarity and preciousness of those peaceful interludes. When Na-kyum first paints Seungho under duress, the panels are often cramped with deep shadows around Na-kyum's face, conveying his entrapment. Later, when he reclaims his art, the wider frames and brighter, more natural light signify his newfound, hard-won freedom and agency.
The layout changes the feeling completely.
It does. And finally, there are potent symbol motifs woven throughout the art, adding layers of subtext. Doors and gates often symbolize consent, boundaries, and the permeable nature of captivity and freedom. A locked door clearly signifies Na-kyum's lack of agency, while an open gate can represent a choice.
Simple objects with deep meaning.
Exactly. Rain frequently appears, symbolizing cleansing and emotional catharsis, or, conversely, a relapse into old patterns and lingering despair. A storm could represent Seungho's emotional upheaval, while a gentle drizzle might foreshadow a moment of vulnerability. Wine and tea are also used symbolically. Wine often signifies disinhibition, intoxication, and a lowering of guard, frequently preceding acts of aggression or coerced intimacy. Tea, in contrast, tends to represent care, calm, and a more deliberate, thoughtful form of connection, often exchanged in moments of shared, albeit fragile, peace.
Wow, so much detail packed into the visuals.
Absolutely. All these elements combine to create a visually stunning and deeply impactful experience, regardless of one's feelings about the narrative's content, making the art a powerful and unforgettable character in itself.
With all these intricate layers of character, theme, and stunning artistry, what does this all mean for how the story ultimately concludes? The ending of Painter of the Night is perhaps its most discussed and divisive aspect, igniting fierce debate among its readership, leaving many deeply satisfied and many others feeling profoundly betrayed.
Indeed, the concluding chapters are where all these threads converge, and the narrative attempts to bring resolution to several key arcs. Seungho ultimately confronts and kills his abusive father, an act that the story frames as providing him with a profound, albeit violent and twisted sense of closure regarding his own deep-seated trauma.
Closure through violence, still very dark.
Very. This eliminates the primary source of his past pain. Key external antagonists are also removed from the narrative. Jung In-hun is killed by Lord Song Hae-seon, and Seungho's father is eliminated. Seungho himself faces some tangible consequences for his past actions. He is demoted from his position of absolute power, forcing a significant shift in his social standing and reducing his unchecked authority.
Okay, the board is cleared. Seungho is humbled. A bit.
A bit, yes. Meanwhile, Na-kyum gains a crucial degree of independence. He returns to his ancestral home village, continuing to paint, now no longer strictly under duress, but seemingly by his own choice and for his own artistic fulfillment.
So Na-kyum gets some freedom.
He does. After a period of separation, the story culminates in a reunion where Seungho and Na-kyum are depicted as a loving, functional, and seemingly happy couple, implying they have found peace and genuine happiness together.
The reunion.
Yeah.
And the narrative presents it as happy.
Explicitly so. For Seungho, his future is one of humbled authority with less power. The narrative implies he learns to value Na-kyum as a person, moving beyond mere possession, though this is heavily debated. He undoubtedly carries lingering trauma from his past, but the story suggests he is actively managing it. Na-kyum, too, continues his painting, is presented as actively choosing Seungho, and his emotional entanglement, a solidification of his Stockholm Syndrome, is largely framed as genuine love. The narrative explicitly validates their reunion as a mutually desirable, chosen partnership, a departure from its coercive origins.
So given everything we've discussed, the abuse, the trauma, the power dynamics, can we truly call this a happy ending? What are the main arguments for and against this controversial conclusion?
The question of whether it's a happy ending is precisely where the core division among readers lies, acting as a kind of litmus test for individual ethical frameworks. Arguments for it being a happy ending often point to the narrative's explicit validation in the final scenes, which clearly suggest a loving, peaceful future for the couple.
People wanted them to end up together.
For some readers, yes. A reunion after such intense conflict and suffering is emotionally satisfying. They find catharsis in seeing the characters overcome their past. From this perspective, Seungho's trauma is addressed and seemingly resolved through the killing of his father, and Na-kyum is no longer depicted as captive. He is shown painting by choice and seemingly reuniting with Seungho by his own volition. Therefore, from this viewpoint, their relationship bond is no longer purely coercive, but has evolved into something mutually desired, albeit uniquely formed. This interpretation focuses on the characters finding a form of peace within their unique circumstances.
Finding peace despite the history.
That's one way to see it. However, the arguments against it being a happy ending are incredibly strong and resonate deeply with many readers, leading to what many felt was a profound betrayal by the conclusion.
Okay, the against case.
The primary criticism is the blatant romanticization of abuse. A relationship built on kidnapping, sexual assault, and emotional torment is ultimately framed as romantic, with Seungho's heinous actions not being adequately punished or atoned for in a way that truly balances the scale of Na-kyum's suffering. Critics argue that Na-kyum's deep-seated trauma, particularly his Stockholm Syndrome, which his own sister, Hina, explicitly called out, is largely glossed over.
Stockholm Syndrome issue again.
It's central. His affection for Seungho is presented as genuine love rather than a byproduct of his traumatic experience and a survival mechanism, effectively dismissing the severe psychological impact of his captivity.
There's also a perceived lack of true justice. Seungho's consequences, a demotion and the killing of his father, are often deemed insufficient punishment for the sheer scale of his abuse. Many readers had hoped for a more justice-oriented or even tragic outcome, such as Na-kyum permanently leaving Seungho to pursue a life of genuine autonomy and healing away from his abuser. They wanted Na-kyum to be truly free.
Exactly. The massive power imbalance that enabled the abuse in the first place, while slightly tempered by Seungho's demotion, is not fundamentally addressed or resolved in a way that satisfies critics, leading many to feel that the story ultimately ignores the very dynamics that made Na-kyum so vulnerable. This profound disconnect between reader expectations and the narrative's conclusion led to many feeling betrayed, believing the story normalizes and endorses an abusive dynamic.
So it really depends on how you read trauma and agency.
Completely. Ultimately, the ending's happiness isn't just subjective. It's a litmus test for a reader's comfort with narrative ambiguity around trauma. Is healing in progress sufficient when the foundation is abuse? Or does such a conclusion inadvertently normalize a deeply problematic power dynamic, leaving many readers feeling a profound sense of narrative betrayal rather than catharsis?
It's a tough balance.
It is. As one source powerfully put it, describing it as bittersweet and a healing in progress ending, contrasted sharply with another's emphatic declaration, "Hell no, Na-kyum deserved better." These contrasting viewpoints perfectly encapsulate the enduring, unresolved debate surrounding this story's conclusion.
And just to tie things up beyond the main narrative, for those who might be interested in exploring more of this universe, what's the status of the Painter of the Night story outside of its completed manhwa?
Right. The original webtoon officially ran from 2019 to 2025 and is now completely concluded, so there's no direct sequel planned for the main timeline.
The main story's done.
Correct. However, the world of Painter of the Night has extended through additional side stories released after the main series. These often provide further character insights or alternative scenarios. Notably, there's a fascinating modern-day alternate universe, or AU series, which features a complete status reversal.
Oh, how does that work?
In this AU, Na-kyum is depicted as the wealthy nobleman, while Seungho is the commoner, offering a compelling inversion of their original power dynamics and allowing readers to explore their characters in a completely different light.
That sounds like an interesting twist.
It is. And for those eager for more visual adaptations, a live-action short-form drama adaptation is currently in production, with filming scheduled to begin in June 2025. It's expected to be rated 15+ LUF, with some specific episodes potentially receiving a 19+ rating, suggesting it will still tackle some of the mature themes, even in a different format, reaching a broader audience.
A live action. Interesting. We'll see how that turns out.
Definitely one to watch. So this deep dive into Painter of the Night really shows us how art can both reflect and powerfully challenge societal norms, pushing the boundaries of what is considered acceptable or romantic in fiction.
It certainly pushes boundaries.
From Na-kyum's initial brutal capture and systematic traumatization to the complex, deeply controversial happy ending, it remains a profoundly compelling and undeniably divisive work. Its impact on the boys' love genre is significant, as it continues to spark critical discussions about profound themes like the ethics of depicting abuse, the lasting effects of trauma, the corrupting influence of power, and the complex issues of representation and responsibility in media.
It forces conversations.
It really does. It truly highlights how stories, even fictional ones with stunning artistry, ignite real-world discussions about ethics, accountability, and the very nature of love in its darkest forms.
And this deep dive leaves us with a provocative question that extends far beyond the final chapter. How do we, as readers and consumers of media, navigate narratives that blend breathtaking art with deeply troubling themes?
That's the core question, isn't it?
When a story presents a journey from abhorrent abuse to a narratively validated happy ending, what responsibility do creators have in shaping audience perceptions of trauma and consent? And what responsibility do we, the audience, share in critically engaging with or pushing back against the messages those stories convey? It's a question worth mulling over long after the final panel.
Definitely something to think about.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dives. We hope you're leaving with new insights and plenty to think about.